Okay, well, this is awesome. Welcome everyone to Networking and Internship Tips from Journalism and Public Relations Professionals. And these are our seasoned professionals. So thank you for being here today. And thank you to our distinguished alumni guests, our panelists, for taking time in their very busy schedules to be with us and share their wisdom with us today. Students are always telling us they want their dream internship, and they always ask, how can I get that dream internship or an internship, any internship? Or how do I turn my internship into a job? Or how do I turn that job into a career? So today we'll be asking our panelists some questions that you all have given to me. I talked to about 50 students in general. And then later, you guys, you will have a chance to ask your own questions by raising your electronic hand or placing your questions in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Now we have 3 distinguished alumni from journalism and public relations. They've all graduated from our program, so let me introduce them. First, we have Robert Meeks, and you're going to spotlight him. Who's spotlighting? You going to spotlight Dan, or is it Debbie? So there he is. Woo-hoo. Okay, he is Senior Director of Video at the Los Angeles Times. And I had him in class, he tells me. So, but I tell you, the journalism faculty, and I do teach journalism classes, but mostly public relations, but they rave about you. They say you are amazing. So we're so glad you're here today. And next, we have Mariana Vaca. Can you show us Mariana? Here she is. She's Associate Manager of Public Affairs and Communications at the Walt Disney Company. And I've had her in class. I remember her well as a student. And I remember all her friends who were undergrads with her in her classes. And because she's kind enough to post on Facebook as well for us old folk, I've seen her travels with all of her journalism and public relations buddies all around the world. She's pretty amazing. And next, last but not least, we have Yunsun Wee. There she is. Woohoo! Yunsun is Cloud Communications Director for Industry and Business Applications at Microsoft. Yes, she left us. She left SoCal, went up north, and left us all. But she is on, you are on an award-winning Bateman team, right? When you were an undergrad?
I was not, no.
Oh, you
but
weren't.
All my
but
friends were.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. See, I associate you with that. But she was very active as an undergrad, and so much so is after she graduated, I think you were a young professional, probably 5 years out. I asked you to teach a writing class for me. Do you remember? And yep. She and Joni Ramirez taught a writing class for me. So we are very proud of Yunsun and everything she's done. So let me start with the questions. What we're going to start doing first is I'm going to allow each panelist to tell us a little about themselves, whatever the 3 of you feel like sharing with the students. For instance, what made you major in journalism? Were you a transfer student? Were you involved in activities here on campus? Did you have internships? How you got started in the field, and how you kept climbing up the ladder, the corporate ladder or the organizational ladder, so to speak, because all of you have these pretty illustrious careers that we would all have loved to have had. Well, I could speak for myself. So anyway, should we start out with Robert? How's that? Whatever you feel like sharing with us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Some people probably jumped on earlier. You probably heard me already mention that, I returned to school. I started getting into journalism at El Camino City College. I am a transfer student. I initially got my first job just by freelancing right out of there. And I got my first internship there. And it's the same internship that our advisors would point us to get our feet wet. It was Gardena Valley News. I did an internship with them for 3 months. You get used to getting a deadline in, publishing, getting yourself out there. And I wrote stories in the early times. How I got into journalism, it's funny. As an amateur filmmaker, I was an amateur filmmaker. Everybody wanted to be a filmmaker in the 90s. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be Quentin Tarantino. I wanted to be Spielberg, but that dates me a little bit more. But anyway, and Spike Lee. I said, what do I do to apply the skills of writing and image taking and all of that to something? And my parents are like, you get you a job, buddy. How are you going to do that? So one of my advisors said, you know what, you should join the campus newspaper. And so I joined the El Camino College paper at the time. It's now the Union. And I ended up working there and ended up becoming chief. I was news editor. I thought I was going to get fully into just doing arts and entertainment because I wanted to work for Calendar, right? Everyone wanted to work for the Calendar section of the LA Times. It was like a big dream at the time. And I graduated and fortunate enough to freelance a bit for Orange County Register weeklies. I managed to get in at Anaheim Hills News. So I wrote stories for Anaheim Hills News and Orange City News, the really smaller parts of the Register publication. So we weren't even in the big Register offices. I was on Lewis Street. But it was good. It was good to get that time in. And I worked at some other small weeklies, Compton Bulletin, the Inglewood Tribune as a writer. But you always learn to do visuals. And then something happened called broadband. What? So the internet moved faster and we can put videos online. And I was able to come back. And this was the interesting thing. I said, how do I apply this? How do I make this work, for digital and newsrooms? And this is what I knew. And I wasn't quite at the level of the broadcast. There's really great broadcast folks here. You guys have great broadcast and, instructors here, but I wasn't quite at that level yet. How do I apply what I know where I am? So I went back to school. I managed to move that transfer on over to Cal State Long Beach. And that enabled me to look around and kind of like learn different courses. And I had Professor Doherty who helped me to clarify my writing too. I'll give you some credit for that too. You got to take that. So, but I went around, I learned a little bit about digital and how to apply putting these videos into this space. And so I, as an older intern, I reapplied and got an internship at the Long Beach Press Telegram. And when I got there, it was important for me to say, hey, I want to do this. I want to work in your digital side, but I want to create multimedia as well. And that's how that started. So in about 2006, I helped to push out one of the first videos that the Long Beach Press Telegram ever put out and ran online. I did that regularly. And eventually it turned into, I was a web producer, blogger, mostly for pop culture. I started a pop culture blog there called Modern Mythology. I did all these different things while posting the news pages and shooting videos. But by doing so, it became more prominent. It became easier to post video online. And it kind of just moved up the ranks. As the newspaper was acquired, my skill set enabled me to grow and to get other jobs and to progress. I became the homepage editor, as they would call it today, but really they call it web editor back in that day. But I took care of the entire pages for the Press Telegram, eventually the Daily Breeze, as we acquired more newspapers and we became a big newspaper group. Los Angeles newspaper group, it's called Southern California Newspaper Group now. As they grew, I became the director of video for that block of papers and eventually moved on to the LA Times from there. And it was a progression over the course of a number of years, but it was because you had that skill set early on and that interest, and you tried to have it meet and going to reacquire more education and also taking advantage of the opportunity to internship that helped to get me on the radar again.
That's wonderful. You've really made it happen by getting all your education and kept going and kept learning and kept expanding. That's quite a story. Thank you very much. Mariana.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, didn't mean to cut you off there, Emma. Yeah, so I'll start off. I've actually always been sort of interested in journalism. When I was in elementary school, I wrote movie reviews for my school's newspaper, and then when I was in high school, I took one of those classes where they tell you what industry or what career you're best suited for. And so I actually got a magazine editor. And then also in high school, I was in a journalism class my junior and senior year. So I always thought that I would be a journalist. I love fashion. I love traveling. I have a lot of different things that I'm interested in. And I thought that writing about those things would be fantastic. So when I was looking for a major for college, I decided that journalism was the thing for me. And I minored in marketing as well, because I always loved the experiential campaign aspect of storytelling. So when I was in school, I was introduced to public relations a little bit more than what I'd come to know before. And so I just dove into the PR section of CSULB and was on PRSSA for the 3 years that I was in school. I was VP of PRSSA while I was there as well, and then was also a Bateman competitor and came in second place that year. So was very involved in the PR world, and also did a number of different internships while I was in school. I think I had 3 that touched on some of those interests. So I was at PMK BNC, which I think is now Rogers and Cowan. I can't keep up with the acronym, but that was in the entertainment space. And then I was an intern at St. John's, which is a fashion company. And then I was also an intern at the Museum of Latin American Art because I love art and I'm Mexican myself. So I was really interested in exploring my heritage in that aspect. But when it actually came to graduating, as I'm sure a lot of you were doing, just applied for everything under the sun. It must have been hundreds and hundreds of applications, but I had, as Emma mentioned, a number of really great friends in the program. And so I was able to use some of those relationships there to land my first role at a PR agency called Allison and Partners. So unfortunately, I wanted a position in LA, but they only had something available in San Diego. So I interviewed on a Monday, got the job or the internship on a Wednesday, and then moved to San Diego on a Saturday because I really wanted to work at a PR agency and it seemed like a really great opportunity. And so after 2.5 years there, I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of PR and was running some of my own clients. And so after that, I wanted to expand my skill set and be a little bit more knowledgeable about corporate comms and communications more holistically. So I went to a retail consulting firm and worked there and did everything from survey development to writing for our internal newspapers, writing for the CEO. And then after that, I jumped to Gensler, which is an architecture and design firm where I worked directly with there are 2 CEOs, but the CEO based in LA on all of his communications. And then this fantastic opportunity came to me via LinkedIn of all places. And a recruiter mentioned that there was an opening at Disney and if I would like to interview for it. And that must have been a little bit over 2 years ago. And so now I find myself at Disney in the consumer products, gaming and publishing part of the company. And I'm interviewing actually for a different position this week and will likely transition into something new, but within the company within the next couple of weeks. So it's been a really great journey for me. And honestly, a lot of the connections that I've made at Cal State Long Beach helped me along the way, even at Disney, even, into that first internship. So I would say you're in a really good spot, and the connections that you make today will absolutely help you every step of the way, or at least that's been my experience.
Hey, that's wonderful. You just kept going up and looking for new opportunities. And I apologize about the Bateman team. I don't think I was your advisor at the time, probably another professor, but that Bateman team there, by the way, they're recruiting right now for Bateman team members for this coming year. But by the way, when she said second, right, that's in the nation, by the way, everybody, that's in the nation, not just locally. So very good. So Yunsun Wee at Microsoft.
Hello. So I will say that I am a story of never say never. I never had the intention of going into PR, to doing tech PR. Everything that I'm doing, I never said I would do. I ended up choosing PR because I was at Cal State Long Beach. I entered as an undergraduate and undeclared major. I had taken all my GEs and I had no classes to register for the next semester. And so I was in a position of, well, I better choose something here. I never thought of myself as a writer. I always thought my sister was the writer of the family. And apparently in my head at the time, I thought, everyone gets one thing and it's claimed for the entire family or something. And I remember at the time thinking, well, what do I want to do? And it's being in LA, I think I naturally gravitated to, oh, well, I could put on the Emmys, I could do events PR type of thing. And so that's how I stumbled upon PR, not realizing how writing intensive it was. And it's the best thing that I could have done. It wasn't until I actually chose my major that I felt so much energy and passion in my schoolwork. Like, I really enjoyed going to your classes, Emma. I remember the thought of having to write a paper, for each class every week. I mean, had I known that before, I might have not taken, journalism as a major, but then doing it, I felt that regardless what profession I ended up in, these were basic skills I needed, as a business professional. After I left Long Beach State, I started off at a very small nonprofit where, I had a big fancy title. I was running the entire, comms department. I was the comms department. And then realized shortly after, I'm so young in career, like, who am I learning from? I really am in still such a growth state, and felt that agency was the best place to be. And so I moved over to Ketchum Public Relations. And I specifically remember sitting in one of Emma's classes where, she would bring in guest speakers, and she had a couple of speakers from various agencies. And I remember saying to myself, oh, I would never work at a PR agency. I'm not sure what it was, whether it was the speakers or it was the job description of how they were describing their day-to-day, but that was of no interest to me. But sure enough, I found myself in agency life. And I absolutely love the diversity of the work that I was doing and everything that I was learning, working on so many different accounts. At the time, I remember also saying to myself, I would never do tech PR. It's just not something that I find interest in. But of course, then I got put onto a major tech account. And at the time, the tech bubble, was just beginning. And so there were so few people with tech experience. So all of a sudden I became the subject matter expert in tech, and I absolutely loved it. Like, everything just made sense to me, at that time, talking about secondary cache and, desktops and hauling around, big, these big, huge monitors and desktops around to different publications for reviews. It was kind of crazy back then. And then I also remember thinking I would never work in-house. How incredibly boring to just work at one company, same thing day in, day out. And of course, I got a job at Symantec doing security. And again, I absolutely enjoyed just the continued expertise that I was building out kind of in my field and working in-house. And because I had the experience of working at the agency, knowing how agencies function, what their kind of strengths are, I was able to leverage my agency, I think, the best possible way, as I was now the client. And then I remember at the time being at a global company at Symantec, thought, oh, my next job, I'm going to work at some small municipal little town where, at 5 o'clock and it shuts down and I don't have to worry about 24/7 working with Europe, working with Asia. And then Microsoft called. And so here I am today. So my life is basically a never say never. I keep now saying, I'm never going to win the lottery. I'm never going to win the lottery.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That is a great story. All three of you have these great stories. Oh my gosh. And I think all three of you are inspirational and motivational. Oh my God. Anyway. Okay. So we've got a whole bunch of students who want to be you someday. So they want to know how they should prepare for the job market. Of course, we're talking about internships, but maybe I should just ask the three of you. You can jump in at any time. And if somebody makes a point, you can break in and make that point too. So we don't have to go in order. I'll make sure everybody gets a chance to say what you want to say. But anyway, how do you prepare yourself for the job market? These students watching today they have to take so many classes now. By the way, for those of for Actually, Mariana and Yunsun did major in journalism in a sequence called public relations. We've taken those courses and now turned them into a BA. So there's now a BA in public relations and a BA in journalism. And also, as you can tell, there's a lot of crossover in journalism and public relations. And some of the students here majoring in public relations might want to give journalism a try, and some in journalism might want to give public relations a try. So I will ask the three of you, what advice do you have for them on how to prepare for the job market? How now to prepare for the job market so that they're successful and they get good jobs too and climb that corporate ladder?
You know, Emma, I think it's so funny because you had sent a note to the three of us, you know, to help prepare for our conversation today. And I had this thought of, wow, you know, when I was just starting out in PR, what was it like versus what do I think it is today? And my image of what I think it is today, graduating from college, getting your first job, I instantly thought it must be like a dating app where you just swipe left or right for, you know, various internships and jobs, you know, yep, I like this one, I, you know, don't like that one. I realize that's probably not really, you know, the way to go. But I would say that, and kind of going back to just my intro, is never say never. I think asking for informationals. Don't wait until you're actually looking for a job to build out your network. People that you're interested in. I mean, people love talking about themselves. You know, schedule a 30-minute meeting. Like right now at Microsoft, we're very big on, instead of scheduling a full 30 minutes or full hour, make it 25 minutes, make it 55 minutes, you know, allow for that 5 minutes to just, you know, regroup, go to the bathroom, get yourself a cup of coffee, and then have questions prepared and get to know that person well before you're looking for a job.
I agree. I think that's really important, and right on all notes. What you looked for early on is not necessarily exactly what it was then. But I will say the one thing that's a constant: always be writing. Did your ABW? I don't know. That doesn't work, but always be writing. Always keep that. Don't stop that. Focus on that. Keep that. Even in the video space, we are writing our scripts. We are planning. We are structuring. We are doing all of that. Keep that. Don't lose it, because sometimes you don't know. You're going to be moving around a lot, and make those relationships early. Start those relationships early, and whether you're in journalism or PR, media and the media skill sets, it was very much a skill set thing. I had to go back and earn new things. But today, what are media companies looking for? People who are masters at Instagram or TikTok or the stories format, because everyone has a stories format, from YouTube to Facebook to Insta. They all took it on, and you know, Snapchat started all of that. Expand that range and understand how to do the best journalism using these different places. And you can say, I can apply this media skill set to these areas that maybe some of the other companies, these bigger companies, we haven't really mastered yet, but we might be looking for people who have the knowledge in that space. I'm not saying that well, obviously, you know, our new editor is basically out there saying we're looking for people with knowledge in that space. So, you know, Kevin Merida is putting that on Twitter. Follow him on Twitter. So, you know, you'll get an idea of that, and interact too. Interact with me, interact with LA Times folks, interact with folks in your local news organizations. Do that early on before you are looking for that job, and we can start that conversation, because obviously those are the folks that you're going to look to when you're thinking about, you know, who knows this area really well, who's really good at that.
I would add to that as well and say that there are two things really. I would say the first one is have a growth mindset. There's going to be so much when you start a job that you don't know, and it's okay to not know. But as much as you can be prepared, I would say, you know, do the work in advance. If you're applying to a bunch of jobs and it says, you know, they would prefer that you know how to use Photoshop and you don't know how to use it, take a moment, spend a weekend, you know, learn the skill, whatever it is, just so that you are at least vaguely familiar with some of the things that you'll be learning on the job, but also understand that once you get to the job, you'll be Googling things as you go. It's okay. No one knows everything, and everything and most skills can be learned. And I would say the second piece to that would definitely be I lost my train of thought, actually. I couldn't think of what the second thing was, but yes, definitely have the growth mindset. And it actually just came back to me. Take a personal interest in what you're doing. So if you decide that you're going to work in tech PR, for example, read TechCrunch, read The Verge, read about what's happening in the industry, because the more you know about the industry, even outside of your specific realm, the more that you're able to bring to the table, because you're able to have conversations about whatever it is that you're going to work in. So those would be the two things for me.
Now, after listening to you, it's almost intimidating when you say, do information interviews or interact with professionals. And they're going to say, how do you do that? I mean, who has the guts to call a stranger and say, I want 25 minutes or 55 minutes of your time? Or how do I act? Do I go up to Mr. Meeks after a lecture? I mean, after a class visit, how do I do that? How do I network? They have all kinds of classes. They don't realize the skill sets that they have. I'm telling you, all students, you don't. You have taken so many public relations and so many journalism courses on multimedia and digital communications and everything out there. You have a real skill set. But see, they don't have a lot of confidence right now. They've been terrorized by us professors who've torn down the writing and have these high expectations. And you've been there, you know what it's like. So what can you say to them? How can they break through and have that confidence to network and to interact with professionals and do those information interviews and to have that growth mindset? Because sometimes I get the question from them, gee, or not the question, but how come I can't find a job? I have a degree now. Well, that's not going to just do it, right? A degree. So can you address that? How do they get that confidence to do that?
I have some thoughts on that. I would say that an important thing to realize about networking is that it's not something that just happens in a professional setting. If anything, it happens in most social settings. So if you're at a party and you don't have a job and you're interested in doing something, ask your friends in advance, is there anyone there who works in what you want to work in? And that way you can casually strike up a conversation. And I would say the more naturally the conversation can come up, the better it is, because it just won't be as formal, which is great. But if there is a more formal route that you want to take, I know that I meet with people who send me messages via LinkedIn all of the time. And, I would say be very cognizant of what exactly you want to get from that person and why you're choosing them, because, everyone's time is really limited. But if you just have, something pointed to ask in 15 to 20 minutes, I say you can absolutely reach out to someone via message, and they might not have the time, but I mean, just because that person doesn't have the time doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. So it's really a numbers game, and, you're allowed to ask multiple people, and, just until you hit the person that you want to speak to.
I agree. You are allowed to, everyone's not going to always have the time, but if someone just reached out, and even if you showed sympathy for the sad state of my fantasy football team, okay, you could do that anyway. But if you did, or if you had these type of conversations that are often very casual when you do meet in person, and lately it's been very tough because we've all been working remotely. We've been in a remote space. So it's digital meetups. And folks that I've met more recently, we've engaged in social spaces, or someone went ahead and sent me an email and asked a question. And, I like answering questions, so I'm okay with answering questions. So you send me a question and say, hey, robert.meeks@latimes.com. I'm going to send you a question about this item, or some things I can look at if it's really brief and it starts an engagement. Sometimes you can do that, or I can even recommend someone you may want to speak to. You see what I mean? So you may not always have the time, but you start that. And that's okay. I think we need to be okay with opening the door to do that a lot more often, and trying to find the space to do it. If I don't get back right away, sometimes, you're working, you're busy, but that doesn't mean that you're not there. You might wave again and say, hey, I just wanted to say, hey, I met you here at this speech, or I spoke with you after briefly, if you remember, or hey, you know what, I thought that the program at El Camino College was really great. And I remember that. I thought that the program here, I was also in Professor Doherty's class with you, or I was there the other day, and I know how tough she can be on your writing. So, that's okay. But trying to do that and feeling okay with doing it is where we are now. So you're going to meet people digitally a lot more often nowadays. And I'm getting used to it too. I'm used to going up to people and say, hey, you want to have a coffee? We used to be able to do that. It's not as much lately. I want it to come back, but we're not there yet. But just saying, hey, online is okay too. I don't tweet as much. I don't LinkedIn as much. I'm still kind of old fashioned. So email does work a little bit better for me. But I'm going to get better at tweeting. That's all I have to say right now. I'm going to get better at tweeting.
Yunsun, you have any comments on that?
I agree with everything that everyone said. I will just add, I think the first time reaching out, like in most things, it's hard. But once you do it, it becomes much easier. And think about what's the worst thing that could happen. I could say, or the person you're reaching out to, all they can say is, I'm sorry, I don't have time, or no, I can't do it. They're not going to say, what, that is just terrible. I'm going to ban you from the entire industry. Like, that's just not going to happen. And I think you will find that most people will be very generous with their time and want to help, a fellow alumni, a fellow, student, whoever it is, whatever that association is. I think naturally people, I believe, are good and are going to want to try to help out that individual.
Great. Sometimes I get students, because I've been coordinating the internship program here in the department. I get students who tell me, yeah, I can't find an internship. And I'll say, how many places did you apply? Can you show me where you applied? And they'll have maybe 5 internships they applied to, or they'll say, I haven't heard back yet. I've applied, but no one's responded. And one of you said something like this. It reminded me of fishing, and it's so true. You just keep casting the line. I say, you just can't do 5. You have to do 50, and I would do like 50 a day. Just keep, sending out that casting. You got to cast. And it's sort of, I don't know, maybe it was Mariana. You said something that reminded me of fishing. You got to throw the line out. What is it?
It's a numbers game.
That's right. It's a numbers game. So, and what's, they can only say no. Who cares? So they say no. And if they haven't gotten back to you, then you call them, or you email them, or do what you need to do to follow up. How would you give them some internship advice on how to find an internship, and maybe share how you found your internship or internships when you were their age or as an undergrad?
I had help from
a long time ago, Emma.
Yeah, I had help from an advisor for my very first one. That helped, but because they were expecting an intern to come in there, and I was the one who was next on the list. Now there's 50, 60, 70, 80 people who might be applying for the same opportunity. We're a different time. Later on, it was a mid-sized newsroom which didn't have a big digital presence in the Long Beach Press Telegram at the time. And I'd say mid-sized, they're big. They're the big daily of this big city. But they were like in the space of the Denver Post and a couple of others. They're a little bit smaller, but they also didn't have a big digital footprint. So I went to a place to say, I'm focusing on digital because I know you don't have as big of a footprint, and I'm hoping that I can help to expand a team that has not been built yet. So I was looking toward the future of where you may go. You're doing a little prognosticating a lot of times when you're looking at places, and you're saying, this place might be good for me. This place might be good. Maybe Apple is good for you, even if with your journalism degree. Maybe Prime Video is good for you. A lot of these places are coming to Culver City now. Maybe YouTube is the place. You're looking to say, this is the skill set I'm going to develop, and it might bring me back over to these other spaces. There's going to be other organizations that do news. They're going to be, it has to be. I think there's going to be more of these other organizations that are going to start moving into this space. So you're looking ahead. And then you know what? There are times where I've asked for meetings and I got the meeting, and then you're like, I'm crying in El Pollo Loco, like, oh my God, I made a fool of myself. Whatever. That's okay. Do that. Do that. It's okay, because you didn't, because it worked out. Right. right? You don't know. They said, yes, you're there. You got to talk to them. That's important. And I think that's okay. And if you email 3 of their colleagues, that's okay too. That's fully expected because I was there. You know, I did that. That's all right. And I think that was what happened for me. I got to my internship. I was developing something in a space they weren't particularly super interested in, but they knew they needed it. Someone there knew they needed it. And as it grew, the internship ended. And actually 3 months after the Long Beach Press Telegram circled back, they had a space on the digital team and they asked me. And then that's where that came from, because you were trying to expand something there in that space. And I did it as an intern. So you're thinking of trying to find a way to get back, and you're looking ahead to say, okay, who needs what? Do we find a way to make, I mean, you know, you guys are going to tell me, Robert, we've already found it, but how does TikTok work for news? I can teach people how TikTok works for news. I can show them how to make it work and how to draw that audience. I can teach organizations that. You know, you're hoping an internship is a mutually beneficial thing to the organization, that you benefit with the experience and the learning and the exposure to all these great journalists. And also on the other side, they're learning from you. Here's where the media footprint is and where it's going, because we want to know, trust me. So, so that's one of those types of ways of thinking. At least how I would approach it today. I wouldn't do it too differently from how I did it in the early aughts.
Okay. Yunsun or Mariana, you want to share about?
I mean, my internships were very traditional. I think I found out about it from the department and I applied and got it that way. Knowing what I know now about how things have changed in our industry, I would, if you're not already, go to organization's site to see if there are specific programs that aren't necessarily posted at the university or on LinkedIn or whatnot. At Microsoft, we have a program, the ACE program. It's the Accelerated Connections and Experience Rotation program. It's a 2-year program. You apply for it in August, and it is a marketing-wide program. So when you're selected, it's not necessarily a PR internship, but a broad marketing internship. The first year you actually, all the departments within marketing will kind of court all of these ACE hires to come and work on their team for a year. Then after that rotation is over, they pick another discipline within marketing to go try out to make sure, hey, is this what I like? It allows people to explore. After the end of the 2-year program, then they are given a full-time job on, you know, a team that, you know, fits both the company as well as the individual. So I would say, you know, look beyond kind of traditional means. I would also add, kind of along the lines what Robert was saying is, or think about it through the lens of what you bring to the table. And I think this is kind of, you know, when you're in the situation you're in right now, you're thinking, okay, I'm in a learn mode, you know, I don't have a lot I can bring to the table type of thing, but actually you do. All of you guys right now, I shouldn't say guys, all of the folks on this call, you are the experts of your generation. Let me tell you, when we have a Gen Z in the office, it's like a rarity and everyone's pouncing on them. What are you reading? How are you getting your news? How do you, you know, digest content? Where do we need to be? And that, like, you are an expert and you have something valuable to bring to the table. And so I would absolutely play that out.
Awesome.
For internships too, I think so much of it is about, to your point and Robert's point as well, framing. So especially when you're in the room with people interviewing, you should definitely think about what you bring to the table that someone else might not bring. And it can be untraditional too, right? Like maybe you have a story idea that you haven't seen that company place yet that you think that they could do, or maybe you speak Spanish and you see that they don't have a lot of Hispanic media relations, whatever it is. I would say even come prepared for an interview to have some ideas to sort of spat out, because oftentimes other people don't do that. In terms of your resume as well, and I do this for myself, have different kinds of resumes for your internships. If you're interning for, I don't know, a tech PR position, and you're also looking at journalism positions, have two different resumes that sort of cater to the kinds of jobs that you're interested in. So that way it's not just a one size fits all. And then on top of that, I would say use your network as much as possible. I know that it was really difficult for me to get my first internship, but then I had a friend who was at an agency and I said, do they need any other interns? And so the place ended up getting a 3-for-1 deal because we were all looking for internships and our one friend got it. And so we just sort of tagged along. So definitely be open to asking people who already have an internship and sort of see if there's an opportunity for you to insert yourself for the next round. Or if you know someone who works at a company and they have internships, maybe reach out to them in advance. But I would say as much planning as you can do and as well as you can frame yourself, the better the outcome will likely be.
Great advice. I also, when I think about internships, students will say, I kind of just work alone, or I hardly see my site supervisor, don't see that person very often. I want to really make connections with these people and I'm not sure how to do it. And I say, well, ask them out for coffee or, have a special meeting or, in the world of Zoom, ask for a Zoom meeting. What recommendations or tools do you think you need to make connections while you're at your internship? I mean, they'll also say to me, I'll say, well, what time do you get there? Can you get there earlier? Can you stay later? Well, what do you think about that? Getting there earlier or staying later, or, asking your site supervisor or other people even in the office for coffee, maybe not in your unit for coffee, or what do you think about those kinds of things? Getting out there and kind of being more assertive with yourself.
Absolutely do it. It's not something that you're going to do now as an intern. When you first get your job, you're going to do that through your entire career. I do that every single day. I'm doing that every single time new team members come on board, every time I'm starting a new project and there's new people I'm working with. Hey, do you have 15 minutes? Let's just grab some coffee. Let's have digital coffee. We use Teams, obviously, at Microsoft. There's actually even a feature where I could send somebody a Starbucks, digital gift certificate, through the app saying, here's $5, go get yourself a coffee and come back.
Wow.
But it's not something that you will do just to get in the door. It is just a lifelong practice that you should embrace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something that you'll do. I did lunches when I could afford it at the time, but I did say I could afford but coffee was my thing, and if in digital space, you can, hey, yeah, let's have a digital coffee. Let's have a moment. I've had phone calls with folks where it's like, hey, is there like 15 minutes? Someone might ask that we can chat. And I said, sure. And it might be later in the day when you're past deadline or earlier in the day before you start all your news meetings, but you're like, make yourself available in those spaces for folks. And yes, you will be doing this a lot. I mean, I work in the same organization with a person. I'm trying to track this person down for a week. Okay. So, so I'm like, can we eventually talk? Eventually we spoke on Thanksgiving Day. Right. So, and we worked together, right. But we eventually made that time and it was a good talk, but we have to hook up. You're going to, in the space of communications, we have to be good at communicating with each other, and you're going to have to get used to that. And I agree. You're going to be doing it for your whole career, and say, hey, it's open, it's common ground. It should be relaxed, and it should be like, hey, I'm picking your brain type of feel to it. And what do you think of this? And here's what I think of this. And it should feel relaxing. That's what the whole coffee concept I think helps with. And offering sympathy for fantasy football. I'm obviously talking about my fantasy football team. I'll stop.
I think one important thing for networking too is being really purposeful with the time. I find that sometimes I'll meet, people for coffee or whatever it is, and it feels like there isn't like a particular reason that they want to chat, or there isn't something specific that they want to explore. So I would say in advance, maybe have some questions that you have, or maybe that person went to a school and you're interested in knowing more about that for grad school, or they worked on a specific account. But I say, as much as you can when you network, like try to make the person feel like you sought them out for something specific, because I think it'll be more helpful when you have that specificity, whether instead of it just being something general. But then of course there are opportunities where you can just have, a general, coffee situation or lunch if the opportunity presents itself. If you just find someone on their way in the hallway going somewhere, like tag along, that's totally fine. If you have something going on later that maybe isn't work related and there's another intern, I would say, make those friends as well, because networking happens with your peers. It happens with people who are in levels above you and below you. You never know who's going to be your boss one day. So I would say make relationships with everyone.
That's awesome. No,
Mariana, I think that's so spot on. If I could just add to that, when I think back at the one-on-ones I've had with different folks, it is the ones that have come with a specific topic, a specific question, that we've had the best conversations rather than a general, tell me about yourself. Make yourself vulnerable, of saying, hey, this is what I'm struggling with right now in this part of my career. Do you have any tips, or how did you overcome something like this? I recently had a one-on-one, I think 2 weeks ago. I was so impressed with her because it was the first time that after my one-on-one with her, she sent me a note back saying, hey, I really appreciated our conversation. Thank you for your time. This is what I took away from our conversation. And she bulleted out the top 3 things she took away. And I never had anybody do that. I'm like, and it kind of reinforced of what message are you putting out there? Like, is this the takeaway that she should have taken? But I thought it was just really nice.
I was the information interview queen when I got out of college, and I just did a whole bunch of information interviews. And then when I was in my early 30s, I came out here and I did the same thing because I didn't know anybody. I did information interviews, but I always sent a thank you letter and usually referenced something they said. Do you find the thank you letters are nice? I usually type mine out, but some, maybe you like handwritten letters. Even in an internship, thank you for the interview. Thank you for the job interview. Thank you for the internship interview. I would really like to work here with you. What do you think about that?
I appreciate those a great deal. And digital is fine too. Emails, and now that's getting to the place where it's almost like, you wrote it, in a written correspondence. But I've had folks who sent me, handwritten ones, and you remember those folks. You end up entering same social circles with them, and sometimes even if you don't work together, you might stay in contact because you just think the sentiment was so strong and it struck you, and you're like, well, you know what, maybe I'll friend this person, and on Facebook, and you keep in contact, and we may meet each other at some point. And like you say, you don't know, you might be hiring me at some point, and you're keeping that relationship, and that was thoughtful. And you think about how thoughtful folks are, and that does go a long way for.
I would say just an email digital format is best. I would say don't bother with a handwritten note. And the reason why I say that, if you send me a handwritten note, it gets delivered to our mailroom. And unless I go by the mailroom to pick it up, which I never do, it will just sit there and I will think that you've never sent anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I say definitely an email or, a message on LinkedIn, wherever you started the conversation, and just make it, short and sweet. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Now Dan Olson has an interesting question from students. Dan, would you mind asking it?
Yeah, so this is a question that came from Professor Henneman's Journalism 104 class. So this is kind of a gateway class, a large lecture into journalism. So, and I'm going to get to the question, but I wanted to kind of make a point, and it kind of dovetails on something that Robert said. And he's mentioned now twice in this session his interest in fantasy football. That means he probably had a really bad night last night and had Russell Wilson on his team. But that's not what's really important. What's important is that he offered you a piece of himself. That was disclosure, self-disclosure. So if you were interested at all in an internship, say at LA Times, and hadn't had any knowledge or interest in football, Robert then becomes a conduit to that. And so he's offered a bit of himself through disclosure. And that leads up to the question here. And the question has to do with social media. And we're talking about all forms of social media, be it Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever your preferred social media, including LinkedIn. The question is this: how important is it for students now to be cultivating their social media image for the future, and what are the do's and don'ts, and the pitfalls and the successes that you can do in your social media that will help you get that first job or that first internship? And I'd love to hear from each of you about that.
So I'm happy to kick us off here. I say that social media is so incredibly important, especially when you're starting out your career. As I mentioned, I got my current job because of LinkedIn. I probably check it daily, if not more. But one of the first things that I do when we're interviewing anyone is I go on Google and I Google them and I look at them because I want to find out about them beyond what's on their resume. So I would just say, Google yourself if you have not done that and see what pops up. I think it's important, especially on LinkedIn, because that is your digital resume, to make sure that you have an appropriate headshot, that you have all of your, classes on there, everything that you've done in your internship, because whatever doesn't fit on your resume, a person will be able to go to LinkedIn and read a little bit more. And then beyond that, I would say just be wary of what you put on Facebook and, TikTok and Instagram and all that good stuff, which I'm sure everyone knows. But at least for me, like the mantra that I have for myself is that if it's not something that I would share with almost everyone, then it's probably best not to put it online, because even if you have something that you think is like semi-private, it's easy enough for people to screenshot it and send it to other people. And I know that there have been instances of that with people who I work with, and not that it impacted their work or no one got fired or anything like that, but your perception, or the perception that people have of you, is really important. And your brand follows you whether you're in person or you're online. So I would just be cognizant of that.
I echo that. I agree. And I like that saying where, you're saying, don't share anything that you wouldn't share with everyone else, especially if you're saying, hey, I'm gearing myself towards being a politics reporter. I'm gearing myself toward being an entertainment reporter. You're basically, your social media is part of that groundwork of you. So when someone does Google you, it's those things those things can come up, and they are easy to find. And I'm not saying, oh, be afraid of this. I'm just saying, if don't share anything that you're like, hey, I'm not concerned that if anybody else reads this is fine. This is information I'm sharing. This is something I'm doing to help you. People know that I have an interest in making sure that there's a more diverse set of journalists out there in the world. I share and I amplify people who do that too. This is me. I'm expressing myself. And now I might complain about the state of my teams, or I might do that, but I don't mind sharing that publicly. It's a personal thing you don't mind sharing publicly, but it's not anything that you wouldn't mind anybody else knowing. And you have to kind of think like that, especially today. It's so easy to search it now in just one search, and there it is. But yeah, definitely everything Mariana said.
I think this notion of kind of personal life versus professional life, like that's really kind of gone by the wayside with the internet. Like you have one brand, you've got one image, everything is so intertwined, and so keep that in mind. At Microsoft, when people apply for jobs and they put in all their social handles, when I look at a person's resume, the system automatically then populates their LinkedIn page, all the different social channels. So I get one full view. And as Mariana said, like I could easily just open up a search engine and just Google, you to see what else is out there.
Well, that's kind of scary that you get that all at once. You someone, whoa, I need to share that with everybody. Boy.
Well, it's information that you put in. So if you supply
okay,
your LinkedIn information. Yes.
Yeah, but most people, I mean, really, they can do searches. I mean, I I'm on Facebook with Mariana, but I got through to her on LinkedIn, and I kind of got through you too as on LinkedIn, Robert, but I don't know, Jensen, did I get through you on LinkedIn? No, Facebook, I think. Yeah,
Yes.
but it is kind of, scary at times that an employer can look at everything and get a real picture. And you're right, it is a brand. You are a brand. And I think about some of my students and what they've put on their pages, and I think I need to warn them about this right away.
And if your brand is humor, if you do humor, and it's not harmful humor, but it's humor, we have a person who's a humorist, but also a journalist, and Mark Potts, but he is humorous and in the display of information, but his brand fits it along the line. So it's very much part of it, so I don't want to feel like everybody has to tighten up too much, but be the brand that you expect that you're going to be.
And Dan, do you have any questions? Does anybody have their hand up at all? Dan is my kind of master here. Where are you, Dan? I can't even see you.
I'm here.
Are you spotlighted, or is it just us?
No, I'm just among the crowd. But okay. In lieu of any other hands, I have another question.
Are there any hands though?
I don't see any at the moment.
Okay, good. Go.
So here's a question, and it's for each of you. Have you had interns in the roles that you're in now? And what are your expectations of those interns? And how do you go about making the selection yourself? So have you had interns?
I have not. So at Microsoft, we hire, I don't know the actual number, something like 2,000 interns a year. And it is a mad frenzy of teams fighting for an intern for their specific team. So on the communications team, I believe we have, I think 5 interns right now going through our ACE rotation program. And as you can imagine, there is a lot of bartering, a lot of just back and forth of who gets those interns. And it depends on the roles, because we want to make sure that the intern has a really good experience, because there could be roles that somebody interning on my team, they're not going to get as much out of being on a media relations team, et cetera.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and interject here. We are at 12 o'clock. That hour absolutely flew by.
It did.
Professor Doherty, would you like to just kind of close this up? And then I'll add that we're going to keep this open for about 15 minutes after we formally close for any more informal questions that you might like to ask our panelists.
Yeah, and students, I see that are all of their, is their audio all off, Dan?
Yes, their audio is off.
So when we close it up, make sure you open it up so they can ask questions. I hope I told everybody, students, before, they'll have lots of questions. I don't see any in the chat. But usually they have tons of questions, so they're probably a little intimidated by you. But anyway, you all have really given us some key messages here to really, first of all, be yourself, pursue your passions, look at all the options and opportunities in front of you and take advantage of them by networking, by